Hey guys, welcome back to the CxG podcast. It's been some time, but we're back now, ready to go, full of discussion. I'm joined with Joe, as always, Corn Muffin X. Joe, how you doing, buddy?
I am great. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm good as well. Very good. Got the Wednesday hump day coming up, halfway through another work week.
Yeah,
Really looking
it's
forward to the.
Wednesday for me now, so I'm off and I'm just sitting at home, so that's always good.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be nice having every Wednesday is your day off.
Yeah, I have like
Is that
the weekend and Wednesday off, so like I have
uh,
2 days on work and then a day off, and then 2 days on work and then the weekend.
that's beautiful. That's like the perfect because it's like you go to work 2 days and then before you get too sick of it, you get a day off. Then you're back to, and then you get the weekend.
Yeah, that's like it's pretty ideal, really.
That really is ideal. Like if I was going to have one day off during the week, it would definitely Wednesday would be my definite, choice. That's a great schedule, and that's I talked about it briefly before. I got myself a new job. I think I started at the beginning of July or beginning of June, and it's a good job. It's good pay. It's something to get me working while I'm going to school. I got about I don't know almost 2 years left, just shy of 2 years left of school, and I'll have my degree. But the problem is I work in it's like FedEx. I work in a FedEx independently owned store, and I'm the only employee there, along with the owner, and that's a huge problem. Like I asked the guy to have um, the day after Thanksgiving off, which is Black Friday, because my wife's family lives in Indiana, and I wanted to have the day off so we could go have Thanksgiving there. And he's like, "No, I can't. That's the busy time. I can't let you." And it's like, "Are you serious? I've worked here almost 4 months. I've never called in one day, and I asked for a day off with like 2 months' notice, and I can't get it." It's really annoying, man. It's a huge problem. But
Yeah, what can you do?
yeah, enough about that personal stuff. What are we going to talk about today, Joe?
Um, it's a good question. What did you wanna start out with? Some updates?
Yeah, let's do that. We've got a few things in mind to talk about tonight, and I think it's makes sense to start off with a brief update. Our last episode, we talked about the RetroVGS, and we had one of the co-creators. I think there's three of them. Mike Kennedy was on last episode, and we talked about the RetroVGS. So this being our next episode, I think we should just talk about some of the changes that have occurred since we talked to him then, and what exactly is going on with this system now, and how we feel about it. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it's a good place to start since it was the last episode we did, and it was with the guy from the Retro VGS thing. So
yeah.
we should talk about it because there have been some significant changes and updates to it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what are you thinking about the Retro VGS now after we talked to Mike and after all the changes have happened?
Wow, that's a big question, loaded question there, and I think the easiest it can be broke down and simplified, and the way I see it fit is that the retro VGS is basically it's an uphill battle, no matter how you look at it. You can spin it like, oh, retro gamers out there would love a new cartridge-based system to have your games physical copies. That's great in theory, and it's a great idea on paper. And from what he was saying, it sounded like he was going about it the right way in terms of continuing some of the long dormant 16-bit uh, series. If that could be a possibility. I know it's probably a licensing nightmare and the rights are probably an issue, but that would be the best way to spin this thing is to continue. If the 32-bit generation never happened and the Super Nintendo and Genesis just kept going, kind of the retro VGS would be that stopgap that would pick that back up. That's ideally the best way to go, and that's what he sounded like he was trying to do with his team. Unfortunately, the day before the Kickstarter was supposed to launch, he came out and said they're no longer doing a Kickstarter. It's going to be on Indiegogo due to the fact they didn't have a working prototype and the price had gone in the neighborhood of 150-ish to all of a sudden 350, 300 and plus. And as soon as I saw those details, I knew this thing was dead in the water. And sure enough, as of today, We were just talking about this, that the plug was pulled on the Indiegogo, and they're saying they're going back to the lab, taking the retro VGS back to the lab and kind of regrouping and getting a working prototype going, and then launching another Kickstarter sometime in the future. Whether that remains to be seen, we don't. I'm assuming that they're going to want to try to get this thing back up and running. But it's a shame. It's a shame because I kind of was looking forward to it. None of the games that were initially, talked about or announced really had my attention. And
Yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to it when we interviewed him that like that pack-in game was garbage, man, hot garbage.
garbage, and that's one of those things where if you look at past pack-in games, the Genesis had Sonic, the Super Nintendo had Super Mario World. That's going to be people's first introduction to that system and first exposure. When you play something that looks like Tiny Knight, which looks like absolute garbage, that's not a very reassuring. That whole collector vision games, I understand that the people involved with it and it's their passion and this and that, but I don't think that those games look too terribly enticing. And for the Retro VGS to use that as its kind of exclamation point in your pack-in game wasn't a very good. It wasn't enticing to me, at least.
Yeah,
What?
I figured it was like not a good idea because if you're gonna have your pack-in game be this kind of just garbage, that like I mean, it didn't look good. It didn't look like even a competent game. Like it looked
No,
like a really kind of something a home brewer would throw together from a ROM hack or something. It's not like exactly the kind of thing that you want to throw out there as the basis for your new console.
not
And
at all. Not at all. What are some of the things that you, after talking to him and getting an idea,
um,
what
well,
did you
like
think that the ball was dropped most on from what
uh,
happened to
um, well, I mean, obviously one of the major flaws with it is like the price is way too high.
way too
Um,
high?
but another thing with it was that when we were interviewing him, I he he really didn't come across like he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah,
And like I felt, there were questions like I mean, there were questions I had asked where he just didn't know the answer. I mean, it's the kind of thing where like I mean, he just couldn't answer it. But beyond that, it was more like, you know, I think there wasn't a fully formed kind of console there to really give those kind of answers. So,
yeah,
I mean, I don't I'm not like saying Mike doesn't know what he's talking about or whatever, but at the time, I think like he probably just didn't have an answer because there was no actual answer. I mean, there was no thing, and like from the thing, and I mean, we didn't know that at the time. Like I had assumed that they had made them already. Like there was a prototype and a
yeah.
way to get things going on that, and it, even now, like I was pretty shocked that when it switched from to an Indiegogo because there was no prototype, and I thought like, wow, that's you guys haven't even made anything yet. Like you haven't you are you so what you're saying is like you haven't actually tested anything. Like even that game that they were showing is not a game playing on a retro VGS. It's like literally a game playing on an emulator, or like a Super Nintendo or something. Um, that's not good. I mean, that's not going to inspire people to pay for your thing if you can't even show a game running on it.
Yeah,
And
I would have never, I would assume that one of the most important things if you're going to launch any campaign is have a working prototype.
yeah, like it was.
That baffled me.
I mean, another valid complaint that people had was that like you guys don't have a prototype, but you have like 60 different colors and like a controller that's essentially just a rebranded Wii controller. Like,
And a third party, not like it was a people. There was a whole thing on Atari Age where I guess a guy had come out and said that he was able to build six working boards that could have been used and essentially assemble multiple prototypes for under, I think, I can't remember the dollar amount, but it was nowhere near the price that they were saying.
No, you're right. That guy is actually one of the people who was on the team that Mike was talking about when we interviewed him. That guy was the guy who was doing. Remember when I was asking about all the hardware things and how the systems worked? When like he was saying like, oh, you could program for the Super Nintendo and then run it on the system through that.
Yeah,
Like, remember I
yeah,
was asking about that, and the guy who
yeah.
was doing that programming for that stuff is that guy that was on Atari Age.
Okay.
So, and he was the dude making all that stuff, and then like he basically said like, I'm out, and they're not going to be
Yeah,
using my stuff anymore, and like basically that means the system doesn't do any of the things that Mike said it was going to do unless they're like getting somebody else to redo all that work from that guy.
yeah,
And I think like it makes the whole thing seem like it's it's a good idea, but just an idea. Like there's no actual, you know, there's no prototype. There's no actual physical thing that to show us like something working on the system. There's no like real, you know, items to show for this thing that you want people to spend $2.5 million on, which I thought was ridiculous.
yeah.
Um,
Definitely, definitely. It's kind of like one of those things where what have they been doing all this time? I know there's got to be a ton involved in getting something like this off the ground, but that number one priority should have been the working prototype. You can't, and they should have known that with Kickstarter that you have to have at least a working prototype to launch a campaign. And it's like all this time has passed. I mean, this thing was first discussed, I think, a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly, and to not have a working prototype is crazy when you're flashing all these limited colors and translucent cases and things of that nature, and there's no working system. It wasn't good, and it didn't take long for people to turn very negative on the whole situation. And the backlash was almost instant. When it came to that, and it's one of those things now where is the damage done? Is the bad word of mouth out there that I don't know that this thing can recover. To be honest with you, I honestly don't know if it can recover from that. What do you think about that?
I tend to agree. I think like it's going to be really hard to recover from this kind of thing when like you put out this you know this kind of I'm not saying it's slapped together, but it has a feeling like it's slapped together because like it doesn't even it doesn't have a prototype, so it couldn't be on Kickstarter. It didn't have like a you know a proper running anything, and then like that guy who was on their hardware team like basically saying like it's not going to work, or it's not like on the up and up with like what they're saying and the cost of these things and whatever, it is like a nail in the coffin. There's like no, how are you going to come back from that without like, you know, again going out and talking to everybody again about like what you're doing, and also being able to answer questions about the previous things correctly. It
Yeah,
seems like nobody is gonna get that. And like even though there's been a lot of stuff like when that news came out, the news came out about it. I'm looking on Facebook and like the first thing I saw is like, what is this retro VGS? Is it essentially just an Ouya with a cartridge adapter? Um,
yeah,
and that's like one of the questions I actually asked Mike when he was on, and he assured us that it was not. And I think it's still not, but I actually at this point like with that guy not being there for the hardware stuff, like who knows what it is now? How is it working? Now we have to he has to go back and answer all those questions again because now like basically the interview we did with him is like null. There's not
yeah,
there's not really a those answers like who knows if they're correct or not anymore.
yeah. And another main issue that I took with it was the whole selling point of once a cartridge is done, you don't have to fuss with up. He was saying one of his selling points was basically companies releasing unfinished games these days and using patches to update things, and him saying that that's not going to be possible with the retro VGS, and he was using that as a selling point when in actuality it's kind of detrimental in terms of many different angles. Say a game is released and 6 months later, the developer, is so pleased with the performance of the game and is ecstatic about the success, and they want to release some additional content, perhaps for free, to reward the players, maybe additional content, additional levels, and they offer that as a free download, 8 months after the game is up to extend the life. You're never going to get those updates with the retro VGS because it's finalized when the game is out, and the time that it takes to essentially get something finalized where there never could be any mistakes with a three-man team just seems like the release dates for games would just take forever. And I think that that um, not being able to update the games with patches and things is actually detrimental when you look at it from that kind of perspective, you know.
I tend to agree. I think the idea behind like releasing games with that don't need to be patched or whatever is great, but um, that was never a thing. I mean,
Yeah,
that never. Can you there like Nintendo's own games like Super Mario Brothers and stuff has glitches in it.
yeah, yeah.
There's all
Zelda.
types of
Zelda.
yeah. It's not like even those games, which were made by giant companies that made the system, didn't weren't 100%. So like, and I mean, I think like obviously, the idea of 100% perfect is like not ever going to happen. But I think, and I don't, and I'm not like trying to put words in Mike's mouth here, saying like he was saying 100% perfect, but um, the idea of it is like as close to perfect as possible or whatever, and that's fine. But
Yeah,
you know, a lot of the idea here is that a lot of games come out now that are perfectly functional but have some small problems that could be patched. Like
yeah,
they're not broken. You can still play them all the way through and have no trouble, but um, they need to be patched to be better. And I
yeah,
think like there's plenty of games on the NES or Super Nintendo and whatever else, Genesis, that like companies probably would have patched if they had the option.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so it's the kind of thing where that uh, I'm never really like I was never really big on that part of the retro VGS. In all honesty, I was never really big on the retro VGS. It wasn't something I was like completely interested in. I mean, you can attest to this because like when you were talking about doing the interview, I was like, okay, I don't really know anything about this because I'm not interested. But like doing the interview was like, yeah, it seemed all right, and in all honesty, I thought it would be more popular than it was. Um,
yeah,
but um, it is the kind of thing that like you know even if he had sold 1,000 units or 10,000 units, like that's not enough to get people to develop for it.
no, not at all. And the thing he's trying to speak of is to keep these, old franchises, bring them back from the dead and get them going again. That's going to be something that's going to be very difficult with licensing and all that. That's going to be a huge mountain to climb, and it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time and dedication. And it's like Joe said, we're not here, bad mouthing the system or bad mouthing Mike, or we said that we weren't impressed with the Collector Vision games. We're not bad mouthing, Gamester 81's Collector Vision games by any means. We're just speaking from what we see and what we know. And if we see a game that doesn't look impressive, we're going to say it. It doesn't look impressive. There's no way around it. Controlling a little guy, jumping from platform to platform with an enemy here and there. Just if it's not impressive, we're going to call it like we see it. So we're not bashing anything. I think it's great that people are still making these older style games and bringing out a new cartridge based system sounds great in theory, but the bottom line is that it's a huge undertaking, and it's going to be tough. It's already tough enough for the three main competitors now that are in this video game war. That to keep their stuff going with the prices of everything rising. So we're not bashing. we're just speaking realistically. We've seen how this campaign was handled, and it's going to be, no sugarcoating it. It's going to be really tough to come back from something like that. You've got to make those good first impressions. You've got to install confidence in people, especially when you're asking for that much money and making those big of promises with virtually no exclusive content, no major developers signed on, no locked in bringing any older games back. There hasn't been one mention of any older franchise or series of games that are going to be brought back with this thing. No exclusive games. The games that are being released were all old, games that have already been out, and some of these games have already seen, patched on content, added stuff that the retro VGS would never get, and it's an uphill battle. If you ask me flat out, will this thing even come out? I don't think so. I really don't think it'll ever come out. I don't think it'll ever get past the money that it needs. If it does, that's great. But at this point, I definitely won't be putting any money down. Unfortunately, I've got my plate full with stuff that's out now, and there's still a ton of retro games out for the older systems that I'd want to buy. And I just, with no prototype, and just I don't have a really strong faith in this anymore. And I looked at more of an interest. I was interested. When he was mentioning bringing back the older, like a new Streets of Rage or a new Vector Man or a new Kid Chameleon, my interest was piqued. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen. So
Yeah, I think I'm like I think when he was talking about the idea of that, I think the idea is a good one. In
yeah,
practice, it's not gonna happen. I thought I I didn't want to be confrontational with the guy in the interview because
yeah,
and I mean I wasn't like I don't feel like we were completely easy on him, but like I mean I didn't like say a lot of what I was thinking, which was like how is that even going to be possible? Like financially
yeah,
because you know a lot of that is not financially possible. I think it's just not realistic, and
yeah,
I think like the way that the crowdfunding for it was handled recently, like really does kind of kill any type of confidence people might have had in it. And I think that's sad because like as much as like I wasn't like incredibly interested in it and had never planned on getting one, the I know there were people who were excited for it and interested in it, and like including a lot of people I talked to on Facebook were saying like I'm really interested in it, and they were like happy to hear our interview. And someone told me like after hearing your interview, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't really trust what this guy is saying. He doesn't sound like he knows what he's talking about. And then someone else told me like no, it sounds interesting. And then like but when the price came out at $300, I thought no thanks. And
yeah.
then that
That's a big problem there.
that was a big
That price.
reaction. I think a lot of people had that
Yeah,
reaction, but
yeah,
um, in
yeah,
in a lot of cases, there were just people who you know were interested in it, but like for whatever reason, like they lost confidence in it because of the news about the hardware, or they lost confidence because the price seemed too ridiculous, or even like I saw people who looked at the Kickstarter and thought like this is never going to succeed, so I'm not going to put any money into it.
yeah, yeah. It's hard to get on board when you see that kind of price tag. I mean, historically, when you look back at systems that have been way overpriced, it's never really turned out good. And what 350, I think you can get an Xbox One, I believe. Isn't there an Xbox One that's 350 now or something? Or
Possibly, but I think the PlayStation 4 is going to be down to that in a couple of months too.
yeah,
So, I mean, it's the kind of thing where, that's a way too excessive and like way too like unrealistic a price for. I mean, it might not be unrealistic for what it costs to make. I honestly don't know, but it's
yeah,
unrealistic considering what you're competing against. And like obviously it's not trying to directly compete against a PS4 or an Xbox One or a Wii U or something like that, but you know, people who play video games, you're competing for their money, and those people aren't. for the most part, like just gonna get a retro system and not those new systems. And there, I mean, there are
Yeah.
people who would do that, but it's a very small amount, as you can tell by like the less than 200 people who supported the crowdfunding before it was ended.
Yeah. And in a weird way, it almost kind of is in competition with them when it's getting the hand-me-down games, you know?
Yeah,
Eh,
it's true in that sense, in that if some of those games are gonna also appear as like downloadable games on Xbox One or PS4, like, and then you're gonna get a cartridge one on this other system, like, okay, but you know that like no one's gonna spend $50 on a game they can get for a download for 10.
Yeah, and especially when they see that the people that own that game digitally are getting expanded content for free, they're really going to feel burned when they don't have that option available as well. You know, it's overall, it's just wasn't handled properly in terms of a business
But
decision.
but like even worse than that. Not that I don't think like I don't think it was handled properly, but I'm not. I don't think that's a really Mike's fault so much as that it's not handled realistically, and frankly, I don't think like there is a realistic way to handle something like that. There is just not a market for it,
No,
and like and I say that as a guy who plays retro games, and I say that as a person who talks routinely with people who are retro gamers who routinely buy retro games and often only buy games if they're physical and things like that. But zero of those people were convinced by this. And they are people who would normally buy something like this. And like some of those people bought the like that Neo Geo system that came out. And some of those people were people who, you know, routinely spend hundreds of dollars on retro games.
yeah,
And even then, those people were like, I'm not going to spend $300 or $350 on this system. And
no.
especially because there's no guarantee that there's any games coming, and they've shown nothing but one terrible game.
Yeah, I think it's in this situation, there needed to be a lot more money. The three-man team behind the Retro BGS or whoever was involved, there needed to be a lot more capital. There needed to be a lot more money to get a working prototype, to secure games, big announcement games. They needed more, they just needed a lot more money to do something like this, to make a splash. It's not enough to say it's a new system that plays cartridges. You need a lot more money to get an impressive system out there to keep the cost down and to show some must-have games only available on this system that you can't get anywhere else, and show some. It just needed a lot more. You've got to have money to do that. You've got to have money, and not just by asking for it with promises in the future. You've got to have a lot of money to start up something like this.
Well, this
You
is
know,
why something like the Atari Jaguar did so poor. And I mean, it's like kind of an apt comparison since the case is the same for the Retro VGS. But
yeah,
it wasn't. I wasn't even thinking about it that way. But like, yeah, it's the first thing that came to mind because when the Jaguar came out, it was not like a weak system, and
no,
it was developed by Atari, which is a known name, and the problem with it was is that they had no games,
no
and the
games.
stuff that they did put out was subpar. So
Yeah,
like when you're packed with Cybermorph as your game, people that's their first experience with the system, and you play Cybermorph, you're just like you're done with that game in 5 minutes. You're just nobody wants
yeah,
to play Cybermorph, and it's like it's a DOA system when like what you're packed with and what you're offering is poor.
yeah.
And even as much as the system could have been good, when what you offer at initially is not, nobody is going to be interested.
Yeah, it's one of those things where seeing is believing. That's as simple as it can be boiled down to. When you hype something up to be the first 64-bit system and you're splashing that do the math all over the place in 64-bit, 64-bit, and you have a game that looks not much better than what the current systems were doing at 16-bit. It throws that 64-bit out the window and it becomes a joke almost. You
Yeah,
know, when the
exactly. I mean, when you looked at the stuff on the Jaguar that, and then I mean, there's stuff on the Jaguar that looks all right, but it's
yeah,
not the
definitely.
stuff that was initially released. So like when you saw
Yeah,
Cybermorph, you looked at it and it's like empty. It's just like flying around empty places, and like every once in a while there's stuff, but like it was like not like well textured. It wasn't like super nice looking. There was just not a lot going on with that game, and it it was basically like, oh, is this what you want us to pay hundreds of dollars for? No thanks.
and it's that first impression, like we were
Yeah,
talking about earlier. Once you make that first impression, and people write it off, it's hard to get them to come back. And
yeah,
no matter how good a game looks a year later in the system's life, if that first horrible impression has already been made, people have already moved on at that point.
the
You
the
know.
problem with that also is that you know, the Jaguar could, I think, could have bounced back from that if they had like a huge list of games that were coming by these developers, but they didn't. They didn't have that. They had
No.
like some games that were coming, but nothing that was going to capture people's attention, and that's exactly what happened. Like it failed horribly because nobody was nobody was believing it. It kind of is the same thing that happened with the 3DO, where like
Hmm.
the 3DO when it came out, you know, it the initial stuff for the 3DO, it wasn't bad.
No,
But it was,
highly impressive, like light years beyond anything I had seen at the
yeah,
time.
like when the 3DO came out, I knew two people who bought a 3DO, and
Hmm.
yeah, I'll admit I was a little jealous of the 3DO because it had some good stuff on it. It was fun to play,
Yeah,
but it was crazy expensive.
that's the main problem. If it would have been, there's a thing that's overpriced, and then there's a 3DO. That was just okay. If that system was maybe $400 when it first launched, I think it would have. I mean, 700 was just. It was just way too expensive. I'm sure people were in. I mean, because it was impressive. There's no denying how impressive that system looked. But when you price something that's that high, I mean, with inflation, that was probably like like $1,000 back then. Now in today's money, and it's just like when it's priced that high, it's not physically not possible for most people to spend that kind of money. No matter how bad they wanted it, it was just too expensive.
Yeah, so like what happened with the 3DO was that even though it was a nice system and it had even started with good games,
Yeah,
or like at least impressive looking games, and it had more games coming. The problem with it was is like even right after that, it didn't sell that much because it didn't have enough systems sold because it was too
yeah,
expensive,
yeah,
and in turn, developers stopped making games for it or putting effort into the games they made for it because the there was nobody out there to buy it. And
yeah,
if you combine those two things, it's too expensive and there's no games. You've essentially just described what they're starting out with for the Retro VGS. It's not that it couldn't have been good or it wouldn't be good. It's that you've basically set up a situation where nobody is going to pay that much for what you're offering, and
yeah,
nobody is going to be enticed because you don't have any games in coming in the future that you can directly pinpoint as things that people want and will buy.
yeah. Yep. So I mean, I think we've summed up our feelings pretty well on that. You know, um, I know you weren't terribly excited from the beginning, and I was skeptical as well. But if they do manage to come back and really turn things around, I'll be interested to see, where it goes from here, and how long it takes. Um, one last question I just wanted to get your opinion on. Do you think timing is of any essence, whether if they get this thing back, complete 100%, say best case scenario, when they come back, they've got a prototype system, they've got some other new games announced that look great. Everything is on the up and up. Everything complete turnaround. Say they do that in a year,
Okay.
6 months, a year. Do you think that timing is going to play any factor? I mean, do you think as more time goes by, the worse chance it has, or how do you think timing plays into this specifically?
Well, because of what it's offering, I don't think it matters in terms of like timing for the system, and you know, in some cases it would matter. Like if you're if you're Nintendo or something, and you're like, I'm going to release my new system, and it's going to be better than it's going to be marginally better than all the other systems that are out now, and
Hmm.
like the timing is already bad for that
Yeah.
because the other systems have a foothold, and like the games that are going to be coming out for it are mostly going to be the same, and it's not exactly like an ideal situation. But with the Retro VGS, they're not competing with anybody like that that's doing something similar. So
Yeah.
if you're just going to release a retro system that only plays retro-ish stuff or like new versions of retro games, um, you don't have any direct competition. So the
Yeah.
timing of it doesn't really matter because the people who would buy that now would buy that in a year because nothing changes. There's not going to be like a new model made by somebody else that's going to outclass it.
Right.
But it's not. I don't think it's a matter of timing in that sense. I think it's going to be a matter of like, are people going to even care now?
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
really like a timing thing though. It's more of like you know, this came out once and it was kind of a monumental failure. Why should I care now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
I think like the way that it was handled for this beginning, like this for the first impression was just so bad for everybody that like the entire kind of idea for this thing is kind of tainted now. And
yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who would have been interested that are definitely not going to be interested now from even if they get everything back to like 100%. It's perfect and it's cheaper and and everything is working smoothly. There's a prototype that works and there's like a couple of games announced. Like even then, I think a lot of people are still gonna look at it with like a kind of crooked eye.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Like you said, it's not really a matter of time because it has no competition. I just think it's all up to them and what they do with this time that's going to make a difference. Maybe some more games announcements. The finalized prototype, the price. It's all in what they do with this time is what's going to make any difference, if any. In this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I hope like for the people who want it that it succeeds, but
Yeah.
it seems like such an unlikely scenario where there could be any type of even nominal success for something like this.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that, and I thought like, in all honesty, it would be probably more more realistic to just make a proprietary cartridge with a for cartridge slot for an Ouya. Like it would
Yeah.
it would it would be easier, but also like you could have like, oh, these are my cartridge games. They play on any Android device that I can hook it up to.
Hmm.
And all you'd need all it would be a lot cheaper at least. I mean, people might or might not like that, but the idea of it is like somewhat similar, just using instead of like using an I mean that I think like that's how the Retron works, the Retron 5 or 4 or whatever all those are. I think they're just kind of like, they're just like emulators on a board
Yeah.
that have a cartridge adapter on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, potentially, like one of the things I've always thought about with this is like, okay, it makes sense that you can like have this board that can do a million different systems that you can program for or whatever, and have your whatever on a universal cartridge. But like, um, there's nothing really preventing people from making new Super Nintendo games now and putting them on a cartridge.
Yeah.
Like,
That's it. That's the
there's
thing. Yeah.
nothing that prevents people from making new NES games. People do it all the time.
Yeah.
If you got somebody who made a cartridge that and a board that was compatible with even like just like a Retron, you would
Yeah.
basically you could do the same thing as the Retro VGS, but you wouldn't have to have a proprietary system. You could just be making new cartridges and new games for various systems that are all
Yeah,
on the
I mean,
Retron.
well, look at Watermelon. I mean, I think they've had pretty good success, right, with Pure Solar and that, just making new games for the older systems, you know? I mean, yeah, you're not creating your own like from what he said, he wanted to create like the retro brand, you know, the magazine, the console. Um, but I mean, in terms of something like that, keeping stuff on a cartridge and keeping things alive, I mean, you seem like these companies are having more success making new games for the older systems and just kind of foregoing the console aspect. You know what I mean? It just seems like such a just there's just so much money needed to get something like this off the ground, you know. And if the money's not there, it's just not going to happen, you know.
Yeah, and I think
It's
the
simple.
problem with it is that the money's not there.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
nobody who, there's not enough people to buy it and support it, and there's not enough like of a market there for people to like seriously consider it as something that they want to have and handle.
yeah. Say in a alternate dimension, Sega comes tomorrow, and you wake up in the headlines. Sega announces a Sega Genesis 2, you know, and they've taken the time and planning and gotten all those old teams back together, or at least got the licenses. And there's going to be a Streets of Rage 4. There's going to be a Phantasy Star 5. There's going to be a Shining Force 4. There's going to be a Vector Man 3, a Rise Star 2. I think that would be an incredible runaway success. You know, it's got the branding, it's
You
got the
know,
names that people know.
I don't think it would.
I really do. I think something like that. I just think that the
I
word of
think like
mouth,
it would be a super like niche product, and that's exactly what the retro VGS is. And I think even with a big name, if even if Nintendo did that, it would I don't think it would be big. And
man, I really do. I think that would explode. I really do.
I
I think I
I
think
just
those
I just don't think they could make it cheap enough for people to take it seriously. And
yeah.
and what I also think is that like nobody would be like a vast majority of people would be unhappy with that. You know, they'd be like, "Well, I want to play Streets of Rage 4, but why can't I have it in nicely animated graphics on my PS4?" You know,
Yeah, that is true. That is
would
true. I
you I
mean,
mean, would you rather have a Streets of Rage 4 that would like on the Genesis, or would you rather have a the same game at but like crisply animated on in HD on your PS4?
that is true.
I mean,
That is true.
I know what I would choose in that case. Like even if
Yeah.
they were just like, yeah, we're gonna do it in the old style, so we're gonna do it with sprites, but it's gonna be on in HD with sprites, not 2.5D. It's gonna be totally 2D animated, but
Yeah.
it's gonna be a
Yeah,
game that plays exactly like Streets of Rage, and it's gonna be on your PS4. People would
yeah.
buy that over the Genesis version, the Genesis 2 version or whatever that you're
Yeah.
talking about. And I think like
Yeah.
that's the idea, is that like nobody would choose that version over any other version that they can get on systems they already own, instead of buying an entirely like niche system for just like a few of these games that like could easily be ported other places, and definitely would be by someone like Sega.
Yeah,
So
I see what you're saying. I guess I should rephrase. If something like that were brought back, the price could be kept down. I think it would stand like a hell of a lot more of a chance than something starting off from scratch like that. You know, with the name brand recognition. Obviously, the money would be there, and the games would be locked down. You know what I mean? That would be the one things that it would be going for it. You know, but like you said, there's so many other factors to take into account, and it is like a niche thing, like you were saying. So I definitely see your points that you're making, and it probably as much as I'd like to hate to admit it, it probably wouldn't, you know, light the world on fire like I think it would. I guess I'm just thinking out my inner fanboy Sega fantasies, you know.
yeah,
But
no,
that
and I think like I understand like why you would feel that way. Like you'd think, oh, that would do good, but like in theory, I think like yeah, people would buy it, but like probably more people would buy it if you would just put it on a PS4. And
yeah,
because there's a bigger install base and there's no overhead. Like
yeah,
even if they came out with a new system and they were like, this is our retro system, it's pretty much like Sega Genesis, but like maybe it can use more colors. It's like the optimal idea of what the Genesis could have been as a 16-bit
Yeah.
system, whatever. And they were like, yeah, it's $50. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Even then, like I think like if you were like, yeah, I've got all these games, these Sega games on there from this new 16-bit system that is like the optimal 16-bit system, and it's $50 for the system, and the games are, $50 because they're on a cartridge, and we're
Mm-hmm.
putting them in this thing. But then you're like, well, these are short games; they're all like 2 or 3 hours, or
Mm-hmm.
like a Genesis game. And then you're gonna think like, well, this could have been a downloadable game for $10. Now I have to pay $100 initially just to get one game.
Yeah.
That's like nobody is gonna buy into that.
Yeah.
Everybody is gonna like there. I mean, not nobody, because some people will be like, yeah, this is a cool thing, and I'll get it, and it'll be fun to have. But
Mm-hmm.
that's like the very definition of a niche market. It's it's like it's not mass market, and which is why there's no Dreamcast 2, which is why Sega is not in the hardware business anymore at all, because they
Yeah.
realized like making a proprietary hardware is a bad idea if you want to make games that sell a lot. And
Yeah.
I mean, look at it this way. Nintendo is kind of in that position this generation where like their system that they've been selling for 3 or 4 years now, it still hasn't outsold the Dreamcast. Like it's not it's not doing hot. And I mean, they're not to
No.
say that some games haven't sold a lot, because some games have sold like in the millions. But like imagine if those games were on a system that had sold more. And I'm not saying like Nintendo should go third party, but like I'm saying if they were on a Wii instead of the Wii U, like
Mm-hmm.
Splatoon or something would have sold way, way more.
Yeah.
And it's just that like nobody is like, you know, chomping at the bit to like buy a Wii U just to get Splatoon. And it's the kind of thing where like if you had a lot more stuff than that, people would be excited. Like if for example, like if Splatoon was on the Xbox One, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not again, I'm not saying like it should be. I'm just saying because there's a bigger install base, it would have sold more.
Yeah.
Um and when you look at things like, the retro VGS, like the install base, even if like the campaign was successful, like it would have been tiny, comparatively tiny to anything. Like it would have been tiny compared to the Vita in the U.S. only. Like it's not a it's not a big market. But like
Yeah.
if you were a developer and you're like, I got this game, um, I can only put it on one system, and one of those systems are the Retro VGS and the PS Vita. Which would you
Mm-hmm.
choose?
Yeah. I mean, you look at it like that, and it's like the point is proven. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's like,
so like even if you were like a big developer and you're like, we've got all this extra money to port this game to other systems. Let's see where we can port it. We've got it now on the PS4 down as a download game. Let's see where else we can port this. Can we put it on the Vita?
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can we port it to the 3DS? Sure. Can we put it on, you know, can we put it on the Wii U? Yeah. Can we put it on the Retro VGS? Um, sure, but no one's gonna buy it.
Yeah.
Like 100 people will buy it maybe. Is that
Mm-hmm.
worth putting the effort in to pay people to port the game?
Yeah. I
And,
mean,
and like if you're an indie developer, even like, is it worth your time to put it on the retro VGS? Like if you're like an indie developer who loves cartridges for some reason, like
mm,
now you've really narrowed down your group. Like, first of all, like the the people who want to buy the retro VGS are people who love cartridges, and there are people who are like that. Their Atari age is a perfect place to go to find people who are like that. But if you live in
yeah.
an Atari age bubble, you might think that like that's a good idea. There's a big market because everybody is into cartridges. Everybody loves cartridges who loves retro games. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not really true. It's not. It's true on something like Atari Age because it's like the focus of the location. But if you talk to somebody who is not like in their 30s or 40s, like they probably never even played any games on cartridges,
Yeah.
and they have no nostalgia for that, and they have
Yeah.
no. real reason to want to play a game on a cartridge. Besides, like because if you're young now, you just think like, well, why can't I download that?
Yeah.
And then if you're older, you're thinking like, I'd rather have this on disc.
Yeah.
Or even like I grew up, the first system I played was an Atari 2600, and I think I look at the Retro VGS and I think, what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, even I think like I'd rather have a disc, or I'd rather just download that stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a casualty of the times, man, and
I
you
mean, it's
factor in
it's
that with the price and
I I think like in an ideal world, that kind of thing is a good idea. Like if
hmm
there were like everybody who was like totally behind the idea of cartridges, and I like cartridges. I don't dislike cartridges, but you know, it's not like something I particularly care about. I don't particularly have a fetish for the media that I use in to play games. Like
yeah.
in all honesty, like if games went completely digital, it would suck, but it wouldn't stop me from playing games. Um,
Yeah, no, not at
and
all.
I think the thing with this is like, I like to have physical copies of games because I like the idea of like 20 years from now being able to play the game.
Yeah.
But as I'm finding now, um, I play a lot of PC games. I mean, I don't now because of my computer isn't good enough to run modern PC games, but I used to play a ton of PC games when I was a kid and in my teens and into my 20s. I was a huge PC gamer. And
Yeah.
there's a ton of games that are PC only that you could only get then that were licensed games that are like the developers are just gone and that stuff is just like no way you can get it.
hmm
Um, and it's on outdated systems like the Amiga and various versions of DOS or like Windows 3.1 and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
you you would think like, well, you're fucked. You can't play any of those games now. But
Yeah.
I'm finding more and more that like you can, and I don't have a lot of games like you don't even have physical copies for. There's a good example of this is the Dungeons and Dragons Gold Box games. They came out in like the late '80s, and they're on like floppy disks. And getting those games now, it's hard. You can't really find them easily, and I can't find them in Japan. But they're all like licensed games from the '80s, and you can. Previously, you could download a bunch of them from abandonware sites where like just nobody was selling them anymore. So like they put them up for download, and it's kind of a shady, not really on the up and up kind of thing. But like there's no company to sue them to tell them to take it down.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things, like even if you download those, which were running on DOS systems, like there are ways to play DOS games. And
Mm.
sometimes like things like good old games, for example, has been like porting these things to newer systems by like putting them in a shell with an emulator or whatever, but it works. You can go to good old games and play all those games from 20 or 30 years ago on the PC and they work fine on modern computers. It
Yeah.
has made me think like, if games were digital, maybe not on consoles or but maybe even on consoles, like if I had those games digitally, would I not be able to play them in 20 years? It's possible, but it's possible that I actually would also be able to play them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think with consoles it's a little sketchier because like unlike PCs, they're not like an open or not as open a system. But
Yeah.
um, I think a lot of the fear or kind of negative side idea I had about having like non-physical copies of things has gone away because of things like good old games where I'm able to play games that I haven't been for sale even for 25 years still
Yeah.
on my computer now, my current computer. And I think
Yeah.
like I feel a little bit better about that. And that being said, I would still pick up a physical copy of a game over a digital copy if I had the option.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And most people, like the audience that the Retro VGS is targeting, would. But then it comes into the point like at what price and at what at what I just
Well,
it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the cartridge thing is nice, but at what cost? You know what I mean? It brings on so many more questions that can't be answered right now. So
yeah,
it's
well,
one of
that's
those
the
things
thing
where
with this is like there is there is a cost over. I mean, for physical copies over digital copies. That's just
yeah,
fact.
yeah,
But the thing with it is like initially that's true, but I think a lot of times with used games still being a thing for physical copies, you can often get physical copies cheaper than digital copies.
yeah.
But if you're on Steam or something, you might be able to get digital copies much cheaper than physical copies all the time.
Yeah, that's when you talk about physical copies. That's another thing that I think that they kind of dropped the ball on is that okay, you're promoting a system like this, and your big selling point is the physical copies. They didn't show any unified like. Remember how we asked him like if it was going to use like maybe a clamshell style box or maybe go the way of like the Nintendo cardboard boxes. There was no you know um, promoting the physical copies. They didn't show any type of prototype like game box that you'd get to how it look on the shelf. But imagine seeing like a little mini library ready to go for that thing with like unified boxes and just to see so collectors that are really big into that shit would get an idea of how it's going to look on their shelf and like what to expect. There was just none of that either. And that's like a big deal too, man. Seeing how it's going to look. People buy games and collect retro games just based on how the boxes look. Petey, for instance. I bought the 3DO games because I love the big oversized boxes and how they looked on my shelf. You know what I mean? That's reason enough for some people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I think that
what Josh, what are you doing over there? It's like making
what
all
it,
this crazy rubbing noise or something off the phone.
really
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but there's like a crazy amount of static.
right now.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
sounds
know.
like you're like rubbing your phone on something, or the microphone is like rubbing on your shirt or something. I don't really know.
I don't know. That's weird.
It sounds good
I
now though, but the
okay. Did like the whole time I was talking, it was doing that?
yeah,
Okay. That was scratching my nuts for the past couple of minutes. I was.
just like rubbing the phone all over your nuts. That's the
Yeah. Put the microphone right up to my nuts and it was just scratching away, man. But yeah, I mean, anything else on the retro VG? You want to kind of move on? Do you want to keep talking about
no,
anything else, Ian?
we can move on.
Okay, you
But
brought real quick. You brought up something I wanted to talk to you just real quick before we talk about something else we had planned. The whole Nintendo thing. I know you brought up the Wii U and the sales and that, and I wanted to kind of get your opinion out there and ask you because I enjoy listening to your opinion on things like this. The Nintendo Wii U with the announcement of the NX coming out. What exactly do you think this means for the Wii U and the games that are supposed to come out on it in the future? Obviously, do you think we'll see any more big name titles announced for the Wii U? Or do you think the
um,
system is pretty much, its days are numbered now?
it's we're essentially in the same situation where like remember when Sega US said like the Saturn is not our future.
Yeah, exactly.
That's essentially where we are right now. Like the Nintendo has um and basically everyone except all but the except the all but the most hardcore of Nintendo fanboys has like acknowledged that the Wii U is essentially a failure.
Yeah,
It it's sold horribly, and it's not that's not to say there's no good games on the Wii U, because there are plenty. But
yeah.
the problem is that like there's nobody supporting the system, and even Nintendo isn't really supporting the system anymore. And I feel
No.
like they delayed a lot of stuff already recently, and they've basically taken the Zelda game that they announced off of the release schedule. I mean, it's still like listed as a game that will be released, but it had an actual like date, but now it's been like pushed back indefinitely to probably whenever the NX comes out.
Yeah.
And the thing with that is like when you have the NX already, like people know it's coming. You've basically shot yourself in the foot. I mean, people
Yeah.
know that thing is coming, and they're just like, well, why would I buy a Wii U now when nobody is supporting it and no big games have been announced, and the stuff that is coming is like Star Fox and I don't know.
Like Yoshi and Star Fox.
Yeah, it's the kind
I
of thing
don't.
where like, those probably are games like Nintendo fans will want, but I think the kind of Nintendo fans who want those games already have a Wii U.
Yeah.
There's not like, if you're a huge Nintendo fan, you're not like sitting back waiting for third parties to put out games. You've probably already got a Wii U.
No, and the NX is. Did they correct me if I'm wrong? Isn't it 2016? They said it will be released.
I honestly, I don't know when they said it was going to come out. I haven't been really paying a lot of attention to it
Yeah.
because like I feel so burned on buying a Wii U already that like I'm like definitely not buying an NX until like there's some proven support for the thing
Now
because
we can agree that the Wii U has had I would say in my mind the worst third party support. I mean even
yeah,
the 60 I
uh,
mean the 64 and the GameCube both had more support
the
third party.
GameCube had a relatively good third party support in the beginning at least.
Yeah.
Um, and it did get a lot of like the multiplats because it was more powerful than the PS2, so it was in kind of an easy port. But
Yeah.
man, the N64 was garbage for third party support, but it had third party support. There were a lot of games that came out that were for third parties. I mean, they were all like 3D collectathons or racing games, but it
Yeah.
was at least there were games.
Yep.
Um, can you I can't even think of any games like on the Wii U that came out recently that were like third party games that weren't paid by Nintendo to make. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
stuff that came out from third parties like Bayonetta and Xenogears or whatever, but those games didn't like come out because those companies wanted to make games for the Wii U. They came out because Nintendo offered them money to develop games for the Wii U.
Yeah.
And like
Exactly.
I have a game that came out as a third party game for the Wii U, and it's that Kamen Rider game. But I have two Kamen Rider games for the Wii U, but they announced the new Kamen Rider game, and instead of supporting the Wii U, they're porting it to the Vita instead. Like
Wow.
they dropped the Wii U support and added Vita support. So I think like even in Japan, where the Wii U has more units sold, I think, than the PS4 at currently, is
Yeah.
they dropped support for it and switched it over to the Vita. And I think that's pretty telling because
Yeah.
there isn't a lot of stuff being made on the Wii U, and like even people who were supporting it are not supporting it. And even Nintendo has been like really iffy about like whether some of the games they announced are going to come out anymore for the Wii U because they said, yeah, the NX is coming soon or whatever, and they didn't really give like any indication that like, they kept pushing back that Zelda game, and then like now it's off the thing, and like we know the NX is coming, so it seems like almost definitely that if it comes out on the Wii U, it's going to be one of those simultaneous kind of releases like Twilight Princess, where it came out on both systems at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
Exactly. I mean, what other reason would there'd be no other reason for that other than that right there, you know? There'd be no reason to retract the release date and change it and say, and also they've made a big deal of saying that it's coming to the NX, you know? And if the system is going to be, I know it's going to be at least revealed next year. That means that developers and Nintendo are already working on games for it. And if that's going to be the new focus, of course, in anyone's mind, that's going to be their, right now is going to be their, because if they're going to come out with this thing, they're going to come out swinging. They have no other choice at this point. This has been kind of like the second, there was the Virtual Boy and now this, where it's kind of been a disaster a little bit, and they've got to come out with big games, and so right now any development that's going into new properties or franchises, or it's going to be NX, and it's they've really, the Wii U just, I don't know, but if they thought like using the Wii U name, kind of latching off of the Wii, the name, if it was going to continue success they had with the Wii. I don't know if that's what they were banking on big time, or if the tablet, they were really banking on that tablet kind of taking over the Wiimote spot, and really continuing that. But it didn't work at all, and now the Wii U is really suffering due to this announcement. Like you said, well, I go buy a Wii U now when the next system's coming out, and I mean, it doesn't make sense that they wouldn't make this thing pretty powerful. I'm assuming that's what they're doing. That's why they're releasing it, because the Wii U just wasn't. It's one of those head scratchers once again, just like with the Saturn. And like you said, there's no really titles coming out for the Wii U other than we got the Yoshi, and there's Star Fox, which Star Fox just got delayed. And now, other than that, other than like Xenoblade, like you said, that Nintendo's paying to have the content. But other than that, I really don't know what else there is. And it's one of those things where they're going to have to really wow people with this NX, and bring back the franchises people have been asking for to get out of this hole they've created with this Wii U debacle. The sales are low, like you said, low.
Yeah, I feel like um, you know, pretty much everyone, including Nintendo, realizes that the Wii U is not something they should be banking on. So
Yeah,
they've got to do something, and the NX is going to be what they're going to do. And hopefully, I mean, I hope it's good. I hope it gets a lot of support and there's a lot of good stuff because as much as the Wii was not as like powerful as the 360 or the PS3, there are at least games I want to play on the Wii, and games that were interesting and exclusive and from third parties on the Wii.
yeah,
Whereas like the Wii U is really lacking in that category. Like it's the Nintendo stuff is solid Nintendo stuff, as all systems made by Nintendo have. But beyond that, like if you're not into Nintendo and you're not into their franchises or whatever, you're just kind of screwed.
yeah,
And like, I've had the Wii U for a while, and the I like pity buy stuff for the Wii U. Like I'm like, well, I guess I could get this port that was this early port that was on the Wii U of this Batman game, not because it's the best version, just because like it gives me an excuse to like dust off my Wii U and use that every once in a while.
yeah,
And like even going forward, like I have one game that I'm gonna buy for the Wii U that I can think of, and it's like that Fire Sharp FE, that kind of for the game that was formerly Fire Emblem, old Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem,
yeah,
and that's it. Like I can't beyond that. I have no games I'm buying for the system,
yeah,
and I think that is sad. Like
yeah.
if that game weren't coming out, I could just sell the Wii U and I'd be fine.
Right. Yeah. Now, the Devil's Third, did that come out there already?
Yeah, yeah.
Was that was that a good game? Was it well reviewed?
No, it I have it, and I played it for about an hour or so before I went to the US, and
Mhm.
I enjoyed what I played. It was way better for me than I thought it was going to be from the kind of super negative reviews it got initially.
Yeah. Mhm.
And the Japanese review, like at least the Famitsu review, wasn't bad. And
Yeah.
when I played it, I thought like, oh, it's kind of fun for what I played. But yeah, I haven't gone back to it since then. And in all honesty, I haven't played any games in like more than a month and a half now. So
Wow.
that that game is, as far as I from what I've played, it was relatively fun. It does it get sucky later, or does it get like repetitive or boring? I can't say because I only played like the first, hour and a half or so. But
Okay.
from what I played, it was fun. I had no problems with it. And I thought like
Yeah.
it seems a lot better than people were leading me to believe it was. But
Yeah.
again, it could. I haven't played the whole thing. I haven't played it entirely through, so I can't say
Yeah.
if it's in the end if I'll enjoy it as much as I think I do now. But
Yeah.
who knows?
And I know the Fatal Frame was revealed to be a digital. like a digital only title over here.
Oh, was it?
In the States, we're only getting the digital, and I think Europe is getting like a collector's edition and all that. Um, so we kind of got shafted on that. But like other than that, I can't really think of other than like Xenoblade, Yoshi, and a few others. I really don't. There's nothing much to be announced for. Excited about with the Wii U, and they've kind of killed it with the NX announcement so soon. And if the NX is even a console, like what I'm thinking right now is that yeah, it's going to be a console like more powerful than the PS4 and Xbox One from the early stuff that I've read. But when they first announced it, it almost seemed like it was going to be like maybe like a handheld console hybrid of sorts, something else entirely. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that's revealed and what it exactly is.
Yeah, I'm
You
I'm
know,
interested in it, but again, I'm gonna go into it really cautiously this time because, man, I feel burned by the Wii U, and
yeah,
I like took a chance with the Wii U, thinking like, of course they'll make more, of course people will support it. I mean, like the Wii like kind of started off like with a huge bang and was like a
yeah,
thing there for a while. And people supported that. So like I think maybe people will support the Wii U, but it never really panned out. And that's kind
yeah,
of it's unfortunate because in all honesty, I like the Wii U. I like the system. I like the controller, and I like the interface for it. I like how the system works. I like how it looks.
yeah.
There's nothing to really hate about the Wii U as a system beyond the fact that there's just nobody supporting it.
No,
And
I actually prefer it to the Wii in terms of an actual system hardware
yeah, I mean it's
and
it's light years better than the Wii. It's just
yeah,
not it just doesn't have any games.
yeah.
And
This,
like it's painful. It's painful because when I play the Wii U, I think like I can see that it has like a lot of potential for it. It's just like going to go forever untapped.
yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely, especially like if you're a Nintendo fan, I think the Mario Kart is like the best Mario Kart that I've ever played on the system. I think Smash is definitely the best Smash Brothers on the system. Pikmin 3 was great. The Mario games are Mario games. Like every entry, and it wasn't until like the Kirby game and the Captain Toad where we started seeing like not like a dip in quality, but more or less like just smaller scale games. Like less development time, budget price. Just kind of pushed out the door kind of quick by Nintendo. They weren't these huge, monster games that they usually do. Just bursting with quality and that I think that was like kind of a sign there too. And I mean, this is definitely the least supported system by Nintendo to date. I mean, they haven't, aside from we didn't get a Metroid, no Wave Race, no F-Zero, no just a lot of stuff we didn't get. Whereas before, even the Wii, like they cranked out, like they brought back like Excite Truck, a continuation of the excitement. We got a new Metroid, even though a lot of people really didn't care for the direction Other M went in. A new Punch Out. They really kind of tapped back into the older library and brought some new stuff back. Where with the Wii U, well, we got a new Pikmin game, um, a Donkey Kong, and like they didn't really, yeah, Splatoon is like a new potential franchise or whatever, but in terms of bringing back some good stuff, it's the least supported Nintendo system out. In my opinion, they really didn't. It didn't go anywhere. And I guess with the sales or whatever, they felt like they were in the position where they had to say, "Hey, listen, this NX is it's essentially a do-over." You know what I mean? In my mind, it's like, hey, we kind of screwed up with the Wii U. This is like a do-over system, but it's definitely not going to be able to come out, being less powerful anymore. I think they've learned that the hard way that that's not going to work. I know graphics aren't everything, but you can't be a couple generations behind like that.
Yeah, well, I think like the thing with the new Nintendo hardware will be like even if it's more powerful than the Xbox One and the PS4, I think it doesn't matter. Nin- Um, because it's not going to get games that like aren't ports. You know what I mean? They're not gonna
Yeah,
nobody is gonna choose the NX as the main console except Nintendo.
yeah,
And what it'll be is that it'll just get ports that are equivalent ports of PS4 or Xbox One games. And another thing with it will be is that um, because like those systems already have like a couple years head start, it's not gonna do them any favors. I mean, those systems will
yeah,
be there, but like if you're a PS4 guy and you're like, yeah, I'm not a huge Nintendo fan, but there's this new console. What's it about? And you'll be like, oh, well, it plays all the games on my PS4 already plays, plus some other games by Nintendo that maybe I'm interested in, maybe not. But is it worth it for me to buy this new system? I think the
yeah,
answer is probably no. And meaning like even if it's slightly more powerful or even a lot more powerful, like it's gonna matter what exclusives you can get from third parties.
yeah,
And like with
definitely.
third parties being so burned by Nintendo for the past like 4 generations now, it's like the kind of thing where good luck getting third parties to give you exclusives.
Yeah, they're kind of in a weird spot right now. I mean, I think the 3DS is doing pretty well. That's another thing. There's not near the amount of 3DS games. Like with the DS, we saw so many great like RPGs and like the variety of games that we got on the DS. There's nowhere near that kind of variety coming out on the 3DS. So the 3DS I think is in a good spot. We'll say it's okay for right now. But I mean. They're obviously selling a lot of toys, like Amiibos are doing really well for them, and now they got the Amiibo cards coming out, and I'd like to see some more variety on the 3DS, but they're in a really weird spot right now in terms of their home console. Because like you said, they're going to be entering with the NX when just as the PS4 and the Xbox One are really going to be, coming into their own by that point, we're going to have some of the third generation games out for it, where they've really started to tap into the potential and we're probably going to have some amazing games out by that point because there's a lot of great stuff coming out for the PS4 and the Xbox One here pretty soon. And it's going to be launching in a time where the PS4 and the Xbox One are really starting to come into their own as consoles. And it's going to be a weird time for them to launch. It's the first time that Nintendo's kind of pulled a Sega of sorts, and it might be tough for them to come out of that too. I think this. I mean, can we both agree that this NX has got a lot riding on it? That I think we could potentially see some changes in Nintendo as we know them if this console doesn't do well.
Yeah,
You know.
I agree there. I don't see. I mean, I don't think Nintendo will bow out of games or hardware or whatever, but I
Yeah.
think they'll have to greatly reconsider what they're focusing on if they get another situation where like the next system doesn't sell sell better than the Wii U did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Because I
I
mean,
mean
imagine
I
that.
don't put anything past Nintendo. I think they can do it. I think
Yeah.
they're a strong company and you know they're willing to do things differently than everybody else. And
Yeah.
and sometimes it works out like the Wii and sometimes it doesn't like the Wii U. And it's the kind of thing where I hope it works out. Like I like the idea of having a console that's really different and therefore makes people make different types of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like the appeal of something like the Wii is that like most of the games on there are things that you can't play in other places, even if like the overall amount of games that are I'd consider spectacular is really low.
Yeah.
um, at least people tried. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lots of failed kind of experiments that are like okay, but not so great on the Wii, but they're there and people tried, and that's what I like to see because it makes things new. It makes people have to figure out things that are new. So like when you have those things where people tried but didn't quite make it, those probably
Yeah.
inspired people who made the games that did do well. And I think that's a thing. So nobody has tried that on the Wii U. Like, um, when you have the Wii U, like you have the controller where you can do things with the controller and the screen at the same time, but
Yeah.
virtually no games use it that way. Most people
No.
use it. I mean, even Nintendo hasn't done anything that's like spectacular with that. Basically, like when you have games that use the controller, also, it's usually a second person is using the controller screen, and then like you're using the a regular controller to control what's on the TV.
Yeah, and I think there's a big problem. There's a big problem with the gamepad in theory, and the way it works is that it's a great idea, and like you said, nobody's really found like a spectacular use or implementation of it, and even Nintendo's kind of guilty of that. I mean, Nintendo Land was kind of a demonstration of what could be done with it, but does it make it more enjoyable? I don't know. But games like Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, where it's kind of like done in the DS style of Gambus Curse, to where like you're drawing sections on the screen, and that's where Kirby kind of sticks to that shape, and it's great. But the problem is that the gameplay takes place on the gamepad, therefore your eyes can only be focused on one screen at a time, you know. And in that game, you're forced to look at the gamepad the whole time you're playing it. And here you've got this gorgeous game that looks amazing on the HD TV, and you're sitting there like looking at the gamepad where it looks considerably less impressive, and that's what you're watching the whole time. I mean, I want to look up at that TV and look at this, beautiful cartoon world, but I can't. I'm stuck staring at the gamepad as I draw lines, and it's just it doesn't work. For the handheld, it worked because the screens are so close together, and you're looking down, and it wasn't a sacrifice in visual fidelity by any means, because it still looks the same on the top screen and the bottom screen. But when you've got that disparity in image quality between your TV and the gamepad, it didn't work as well with the Wii U, and I don't want to have to buy another Nintendo console yet. I think the Wii U games like Donkey Kong, games like Mario Kart, these games are gorgeous, and they're running at 60 frames. They're smooth. I think they look great, and it's I don't want to have to buy another console already from Nintendo. I want this thing to keep going, as a system. I like the Wii U. I like the gamepad. I think it's sad we're never going to see something really, really innovative, use of the gamepad. I think Zombie U did some really cool things for the use of the gamepad. It really worked well, and it added to the experience. And that game didn't sell well. Now it's coming out for other consoles, just dropping the U off the end of it. And I don't think the Wii U was ever really properly used. I mean, yeah, it's not as powerful, but the games still look great. They're bright and colorful, and also, those Nintendo games are more cartoony. It's not as visually demanding, but it's still a great looking console, and it's too. I feel like I just got the Wii U. I got it for Christmas. I think last year or the year before. I don't feel like I've logged on a considerable amount of hours with it. I don't feel like I've really gotten to know it as a system, and now something new is coming out. I feel like a lot of wasted potential with the Wii U. You know?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of wasted potential. I think that we'll never get to see. There is just so
No.
much stuff where um, you know you you could have come up with a lot of stuff for the Wii U, but there's just nobody is doing it. Nobody is trying to develop for the Wii U, and nobody is like even remotely interested in doing it now since nobody is buying the system.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's a money issue. You're not going to, you know, take time and money to put something out on a system that it's not going to sell for. Because initially it started off, what they have on there, they had the Batman and like the Assassin's Creed, and they put the Mass Effect 3 of all games, like a huge in-depth RPG series, but not the first two, just the third. And like so they started off with the multiplats, and I think Watch Dogs, I think that never even ended up coming out on the system. I mean, that was promised, and that never
I
came
think
out. And
that did come out.
after that, after Watch Dogs never came out, I don't think Ubisoft even really messed around with the Wii U. I mean,
I'm pretty sure
the
Watch Dogs came out.
did it come out on the Wii U?
Yeah, just like months and months later.
Oh, was it? Okay. Okay, yeah, I think you are right. Yeah, Watch Dogs. I was thinking of something else that, yeah, it did come out. You're right. You're right. Because there was Watch Dogs and then Rayman, when Rayman was supposed to be exclusive, and it didn't. What was I thinking of that was supposed to come out and they never even ended up? I must be thinking of something else, man. But yeah, the third party support it just dropped off. What started off as promising, um, and nothing. It's a weird spot for the Wii U, and it's a weird spot for Nintendo. And I mean, thank God for like the Amiibos right now, like money coming in. You know what I mean? They're really pulling in some money on the Amiibos, and they got like I don't know if you've seen all the different like World of Nintendo figures that are coming out these days, like all the Metroids and all these different figures, and they're selling a lot of merchandise in terms of figures and Amiibos and the cards. Um, so
I
I'm
haven't
if
seen any of that stuff because I'm not like a Nintendo fan enough to look for it.
Yeah,
But
I get drugged to Toys R Us every weekend by my kid, and I see it in the stores, and I see all the popular figures are sold out. So they've got tons of plushes and figures, and the Amiibos are always empty. So they're selling merchandise. That's for sure. You
yeah,
know,
that's I mean I don't doubt that they're like doing okay with money for this kind of stuff. Like um those systems are good. I mean, and their characters are popular, and the
yeah.
amiibos are like uh, crazy high sellers.
How
So
is it? Is that in Japan? Is that the same way the Amiibos? And how is the 3DS selling in Japan, and like in relation to the Vita, like right
um,
now?
you know, I haven't been paying attention to it recently, but generally the 3DS sells more than the Vita by like a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and there are a bunch of you know, amiibos sell well, but generally the ones that are rare sell
Uh-huh.
because people buy them and sell them on eBay.
Yeah.
So like it's not really like they're super rare in Japan for the most part. It's
Uh-huh.
that like they get rare in Japan because people in Japan will buy them and sell them on eBay for people in America who are like
Gotcha. Yeah.
going for scalper prices or whatever. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that, which
Hmm.
is, lame. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care because I don't collect those things and I'm not even remotely interested. But,
Yeah.
um,
I see
man,
there's a new Vita. There's a new Vita coming out here. It's a limited edition blue Vita.
yeah, there are a
It's
bunch
almost
of
like,
colors that they announced at Tokyo Game Show.
yeah, I was surprised. I mean, and there's new games coming out on the Vita. I just picked up a Steins Gate, and there's like this. I don't know if you played Norn 9.
I haven't
Have you
played
heard of
any of
that?
those.
Yeah, there's Norn 9, and there's another visual novel. It's called. It looks amazing. Multiple endings, and there's multiple like wooing different women. War comic. I forget the name of it, but there's two visual novels that are coming out that look really good. Um, and then there's also like the Trails in the Skies coming out, like the box set. I got that pre-ordered. There's a bunch of RPGs that are coming out by the end of the year. The new Corpse Party, a physical version of that is coming out. I think it's called Corpse Party Blood Drive. There's at least I think 5 to 10 like RPGs and visual novels that are coming out on the Vita before the end of the year. And then there's two on the 3DS that I want. There's Legend of Legacy, and then the Stella Glow, which is like the new Luminous Arc game coming out. But if I look at the numbers, there's more Vita games coming out by the end of the year that I want. Between visual novels and RPGs, definitely on the Vita more. So it's got to be doing something right over here. They wouldn't keep making these kind of games, you know what I mean? So, and they wouldn't be bringing out an additional color of the system. So, people can rag on the Vita and say it's whatever this and that, but there's a lot of games coming out for it, and I'll be damned if I don't want that blue system, you know?
Yeah,
I do
I
it.
don't know. The Vita is like pretty well supported in Japan, so when those
Yeah,
games come out for you guys, it's like seems like a no-brainer since it's kind of the kind of thing where
yeah,
like it's just a port. I mean, not a
yeah,
port, but a localization. So,
yeah.
um,
Like I picked up there's the Danganronpa, the third one just came out, and there's that new X Blaze Lost Memories, and then I'm playing through Lost Dimension right now. I'm getting pretty close to the end, and I'm enjoying that game quite a bit. You know, sure the there's some things could be fleshed out a little more in terms of like finding the traitor and this and that. But overall, I like the battle system quite a bit.
Yeah, I enjoyed that game.
Yeah, I think it's a good game. It really is, and I do like Steins Gate quite a bit. I know it's not like a exclusive; it's an older game or whatever is out on other systems. But I'm playing through Tokyo Twilight Ghost. What is it?
Ghost
Tokyo
Hunters.
Twilight. Yeah, that's pretty damn impressive too. I initially the battle system kind of turned me off, but I went back to it and put some more time into it, and man, I think it's a really good game. I love those visual novel style games that are coming out on the Vita. I think they're great.
Yeah, I
There's
was sort of interested in Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters, but like the battle system is like that kind of thing where it's kind of random, so
yeah,
it's
it
not
it
exactly
takes.
it's kind of like the opposite of what I like. So I thought, oh,
Yeah,
I'm probably not gonna like it, so I never got it.
yeah, it takes some time to get used to, but once you do, and you do get used to it, the story is really dark, and the hand-drawn graphics are just just like their breath. They leap off the screen, man. It looks so good the way the art style is, and it's really compelling package overall. I love the kind of dark, like morose atmosphere of it all. It's really cool. Um, Let me pull up. I want to see what this other Vita game is that I was thinking about. Okay, it's called Code Realized Guardian of Rebirth, and that comes out later on in October. It's by Axis. It's like a visual novel. Looks really good. That and Norn 9. This one is the one where you play as. It's like it says, tell your own love story, play to experience your own romantic fairy tale. Which of these dashing five will capture your heart and sweep you off your feet? Like, I'm a sucker for that kind of cheesy shit, man. I love it. You know what I mean? Like the different storylines and the wooing the women and all that. I just think that shit's cool as hell.
There's a lot
And
of those. There's a lot of those games in Japan.
yeah, and I did pick up also. I picked up that Dungeon Traveler, the Sting
Oh,
RPG.
okay. I've heard
Yeah,
a lot of good things about that, but I haven't played it.
yeah, man. Like I know I've said in the past that I'm sick to death of like first person dungeon crawlers, but I got to make an exception when it's number one Sting and number two when that shit is that over like the monsters in that game are like half naked, like beautiful women, man. It just I can't pass something like that. It's amazing. Like the gameplay's super smooth, the story's enjoyable, and that artwork, man, is just gorgeous. It's the Vita. It's one of those things where you play that for a while and you go back to the 3DS and not once again not saying graphics are everything, but that screen is just so gorgeous for those style of games. It's so sharp and vivid. You go back and play the 3DS, it's just a little the screen the disparity between the two screens is man, that Vita's got a gorgeous screen, you know.
Yeah, I
But
agree. I really like the way the Vita screen makes those games look. It's really good.
yeah, it just pops off the screen. Sometimes I think that it's all I need is a Vita. It's basically a super powerful handheld, and you got a little HD screen built right onto it, man. It's everything you could possibly need. I really do like the Vita. I think that once the Vita's done and over with, I think in the years to follow, people are going to really come to appreciate the Vita. I think it's really going to have I think it's going to have really strong afterlife, man. People are going to really realize that some of these people that might not have paid attention to it while it's been out, are going to come to realize that it had some really good games, and I think the Vita will be appreciated for many years after it's gone. You
Yeah, I
know.
agree. I think there's a lot of games that a lot of not a lot of people have experienced
Hmm.
that they're gonna kind of regret not experiencing.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to pre-order that the blue one, number one, because I have two. I have two Vitas right now. I've got the white one and I've got the black one, but they're both of the original model. And so I've got two of the OLED ones, and I really kind of want to see what the Slim looks like. The LCD screen. I do want to at least own one Slim model, and then that'll be it for I think three is enough Vitas. A little
Maybe
little
that's enough.
overkill. Yeah, a little overkill. I tell you what though, man, I still like pulling. I've got a PlayStation Portable. I bought the God of War model. It's like the half black and half red, and I still pull that thing out, every 6 months or so and just take it out of the box and kind of like hold it and like it's flawless, man. There's not a fingerprint on that thing, and it's a really good looking system. And now everywhere you go, there's no PSPs anymore. There's no PlayStation Portables, and I'm so used to going to the flea market or whatever, or to the Gibraltar Trade Center, and I always see used PSPs for sale, and they're so beat to shit, man. Like the screens are butchered, they're filthy. It's just nice to go home and pull out a nice brand new flawless PSP, and just think there's not really probably that many out there that are still like brand new condition mint. They're all so beat up, dude. People are really rough on their handheld systems.
Yeah, I mean, my handhelds, they usually don't look that good either because like I keep them in my bag usually. So like when I'm walking
Yeah,
around, they get scuffed up.
yeah,
That kind of stuff happens, but I'm not like incredible. I don't feel bad about it because I'm not like gonna sell them.
yeah,
So it's the kind of thing where like, I got a screen protector on there, so like it's not horrible.
yeah. I'm really weird about my handhelds, man. Like if it's I'll buy a specific unit for everyday use that I'm not too crazy about like scuffs or whatever. I try not to get it fucked up or whatever, but I'll have one unit that I use and take to work with me and take when I go places, and I'm not too like anal about that, but like the ones that I keep, like as backups or whatever, I'm incredibly OCD about it, dude. It's almost like if the common person would think I'm a fucking weirdo, by the way I take care of this shit, but it's character flaw, I guess. But uh, well, Joe, as you know, it's probably close to 4 o'clock in the morning. I got to be up for work in the morning. We didn't even get to another topic that we had, but for those that still listen to the podcast, and there are people. I mean, I get messages all the time, and I want to give a shout out to Xander Scullion. He did a video a couple days ago, and he was talking about he was recommending podcasts, and he threw ours out there and praised Joe and myself and the podcast. He loves listening to it. He just says that he wishes episodes would come out more because he wants to hear more of it. And I've gotten messages from a lot of you guys saying, what's up with the podcast? Are you guys doing more episodes? And I know there's a good few of you out there that really enjoy, listening to the podcast, and we enjoy doing it. I know I do. And it's just, with the schedules, Joe lives in Japan, I live in the States, and we both work in different time zones. It's not always the easiest to get together and do these things, but I'd like to get more of a set schedule. Tuesday night seems to work out good for both of us, which is actually kind of turns into Wednesday morning. But we didn't get to one of the topics we had planned. So if Joe is down for it, I'm totally down for this same time next week, maybe doing a little half episode or something and talk about the topic that we also wanted to get into this episode, but due to the time, we're just not going to have time to tonight. So, Joe, if that's something you're interested in,
Yeah,
I'm down for
we can do
next
that.
week.
We can do that easily because I record the wrestling podcast on the same day in the morning.
Yeah.
So like,
Okay.
I mean, anytime after like, or I mean, anytime like around when we started today, or like even an hour or two before, I'm free.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Maybe I'll do that then. I'll hit you up like maybe like an hour before, and then next week we can kind of get a little mini episode out there and talk about the topic that we had planned.
yeah,
Um,
that should be good. Yeah, if you want to
okay.
do that, we can do that. So maybe there'll be an elusive another episode coming soon.
Yeah. Yeah. On time next week. That'd be one hell of a thing for sure. So yeah, I want to just thank all you guys that still listen and send messages and support the podcast. That's cool. I'm glad you guys enjoy listening to it because it's good to talk to Joe. He knows his shit. He's an intelligent guy. The conversation, it's never awkward. There's never awkward pauses or stops, or I mean, we could sit here and talk all night and it'd be just as enjoyable as we first started talking. So I always enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. And like even though like if people have been watching my channel, you realize that like I'm kind of on like a game hiatus. I haven't played any games, I haven't bought any games since the beginning of August. And even then, like even without playing games, I still look at game news and I still like games and I still like, you know, have played a million games. So it's the kind of thing where like doing this podcast is not hard for me to do because like I can still talk about games a lot and I'm still
Yeah.
interested in games. It's just I don't really have I just have like other things I'm focusing on at the moment.
Yeah,
But
it's not at the forefront
yeah,
of your
so
daily.
but like even then like doing this podcast, we've been talking for like almost 2 hours or maybe a little more and
Yeah.
it's been fine going. Like as you can see, like I'm not um abandoning games. I'm just kind of on a little hiatus here. And
Yeah.
I'll be back to my normal gaming life when Fallout 4 comes out where it will probably take over everything I do. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think we can go back to the topic we were going to do earlier next week and that'll be fine, hopefully.
All right, so that sounds good. All right. Well, until then, you guys take it easy,
Yeah,
and
we hopefully the episode will come sooner rather than later, and we'll talk to you guys again next time.
all right, we'll see you guys.